Welcome to Equipping Leaders, a podcast where I share and discuss resources, tools, and information to equip leaders to build creative, cohesive teams through culture and leader development. Welcome to the Equipping Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Natasha, and today I am sharing a conversation that I had with Executive Coach Shawn Perry on the DiSC behavioral style model to increase better communication in coaching and leadership. Hello, Shawn. Thank you for joining me today. So could we start by having you introduce yourself and your style of coaching?
Certainly. Well, I'm Shawn Perry, and I'm a Army retiree, been around a little bit, done some things there and done a whole lot of other things outside of it. So I like to tell folks, much like Indiana Jones, it's not the age, it's the mileage, right? So I've been around, seen some stuff, which is great because it gives me perspective, perhaps, that other folks, may not have. And so I really enjoy the ability to share that perspective, and the method I've chosen to really share that, as opposed to just telling people my stories over and over and over again, which I might be prone to do as a I person in the DiSC methodology, is through coaching. And to be able to help somebody move through a challenge that they're facing, a dilemma, an obstacle, maybe it's a mental block, maybe there's something physical, maybe they just had a loss of what to do, right? So the idea of adding value to them by helping them solve their problem has just been very, very rewarding. And because I've seen so many different things and I continue to learn, there's nothing, in fact, I'm reading a book right now on tennis coaching, and I have no intention of coaching tennis, but it's the idea of the coaching aspect of it that I'm finding just fascinating. Yeah, so I like to coach. And typically, I would say my style is almost situational. In the Army, they taught us about situational leadership. Right, how I treat soldier A may be different than I treat soldier B and soldier C. And, oftentimes I express it as if I've got this person here and say, hey, here's your task. You've got 40 minutes, go. And then this other person, I say, okay, here's what I want you to do. And I want you to do, A, B, C, and D with that. You got an hour, come back to me. And then person 3, it's like, all right, come over here, pick up the phone, dial this number, say hello. I mean, you have to treat people differently where they're at. And so my coaching style is similar. I like to be, engaged in it, right? So sometimes there's a requirement to be somewhat prescriptive. I mean, if you've played sports or learned a new skill, right, the coach shows you how to do it. Hey, here's how you kick the ball. Other times you need to be a little bit more visionary. Okay, well, here's this vision that I have for you, or here's an idea. Now you figure out how to go get it. One of my favorite quotes is from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, right? The French author. And he had said, if you want people to build you ships, don't teach them about measurements and timbers and all of that. Rather, teach them the longing for the open ocean, and they will build you a ship, right? So that's that visionary kind of coaching. But also the creative piece. Okay, hey, we have a challenge here. So, I might have an idea in my own head about what this might look like, but let's explore this together. And I'm not going to give any suggestions. Let's see what they come up with, right? So it's really situational to what that person needs. Sometimes it can be very holistic. If people are like, oh, I don't know, my life isn't right, or I'm not doing something well. And okay, well, let's try to narrow it down holistically to something that we can control and they can address. And then we move on to the next thing, right? So just, I got to fix my life. Well, that's certainly tough to do. So I say, that's me, right? Been around a little bit, done some Army time, got some other stuff I've done in my life. And I've got 4 kids, right? 3 adult children and a soon to be 6th grader. So I have all that. I ride motorcycles and cut down trees and boss people around and develop them. So that's what we do.
I love that. And I really appreciate too that holistic perspective, because sometimes I think that when we go into coaching as coaches, we think this is the type of coach I am, and this is the value that I can help with this person, right? Maybe I guide people through transitions or, through career changes. But when we do that, we ultimately also kind of are putting our agenda still on them. Like, this is what I can do and this is what I can offer. So I really like that holistic perspective of what do you need? Like, as a coach, I'm here to guide you. So how do you need to be guided? And being open like that to all those different realms. I think maybe sometimes coaches don't have the confidence to be like, they're talking about something that is not in my realm. And then, then both people miss out on what could be a really great coaching session.
Right. In fact, those experiences when my clients bring up something that I know absolutely nothing about are really more of my favorite ones. Because I try to, I think as a growth-minded person, right, I like to think I'm naturally curious. And so when they start talking about a situation they have that I've got no experience with, that's just an opportunity for me to ask a lot of questions. And so really my approach then to coaching is just that. Asking the questions, help them solve their problem in their solution, right? So, but you're absolutely right. With that bias that people can come into it with, that we talk about transitioning from one career field to another, there are people that say, I specialize in that. And that's great. But whoever is doing that transitioning has a lot more going on in their life than just trying to transition to something, right? So there's all the anxiety and the nervousness, and there's the sense of loss and the sense of excitement and apprehension, all of that. And if you're just focusing on placing that person somewhere, you're right, you're going to approach it from, I got to place you, so let's just focus on that. Versus, let's heal you, or let's grow you, let's strengthen you, and then the answer will appear, right? Which would be more of the way I think you and I would approach that.
And I know that as coaches, we also take inspiration, if you will, and frameworks from a lot of different places for whatever will work for our clients. But are there specific tools and frameworks that you commonly use in your coaching or that inspired your coaching?
Certainly. I've done a lot of woodworking. I've done a lot of work on cars and vehicles and things. So I think many folks could relate to the idea of, if you have the right tool, it makes doing the job a whole lot easier. I mean, yes, I can smack that nail head with a screwdriver and it will eventually go into the piece of wood. But if I had a hammer, we'll get there much faster, right? So having the right tool helps to expedite some of those things. So some of the tools that I use, DiSC, right? We're going to talk about the DiSC behavioral assessments here in a little bit, but that is one of the tools because it really helps people identify a number of things. First and foremost, an increased level of self-awareness, right? And so self-awareness is really the foundation of any kind of growth or any kind of development. And I mean, if you want to take a trip somewhere and you plug in the destination in your GPS, it says, all right, where do you want to start from? Okay, well, I gotta know where I am so I can get there. So I do this. So DiSC is one of the tools I use. There's also a Tagoro framework. And this is something that a guy, Christian Simpson, has introduced to me. And it's an acronym, remember, right? So it's TGOROW. And this is how, when I meet with a client for the first time, that I explain this to them because it's a very good way to approach a coaching session. Right. So it's not, here's my overarching approach, but actually sitting down with a client, you say, okay, what do you want to discuss today? And they're going to have a topic. And if they don't have a topic, we might talk about that and get them to a topic. But here's what I want to talk about today. And I ask them, what's your goal? In an hour, when we're done with this coaching session, what do you want to have figured out? Is it an action item? Is it just a better understanding? Is it a to-do list? I mean, what do you want to get out of this hour? I always say, I want to make this the best, most impactful hour of your week, that sort of a thing. But, where do you want to get at this end hour? That way we can stay focused to get there and we just wander off on all kinds of things. TGO, the O is the outcome. So what is it that they want to achieve, overall? And of course, then we get into, all right, well, what's happening now? What are the options? What different things can you do? And then once we figure out what the things they can do, okay, what are you willing to do? And what are you going to do? So that's a general framework for how a coaching session with me goes. But again, situational. There have been times when we start out that way and really I almost have to step outside of coach to consultant, sometimes collaborative, when we find ourselves in a brainstorming session and they are stuck and I can't ask them, well, who else do you know might know this? Can you phone a friend? And only so many times. And it's okay, well, hey, here, or a lot of times I'll find, here's how I've seen how somebody else has handled a similar situation. What are your thoughts about that? And usually then it's like it releases the dam on their thinking, right? If they're blocked, because now they're focusing on what somebody else did, and then it unleashes all this stuff that's been behind their, in their subconscious. They comprehend it, so they figure out their problem. So that's really the one of the frameworks that I would use starting off that Tagoro model. But really, for me, it comes down to connection. And I'm a big believer that if you want to help somebody, right, well, then you got to be able to connect with them. I can try to teach somebody, a student, all day long when I was doing instruction, but if they're not in the mindset to learn anything, we're just wasting both of our times. So there's this connection piece there. And I've learned from John Maxwell that when people meet somebody for the first time, they typically ask 3 questions, right? They ask, okay, can this person help me? Can I trust this person? And then lastly, does this person care about me? So when I approach a coaching client, I start that. So I share my credentials. Here's what I've done. Here's what I do. Here's what I know. Here's what I don't know. I tell them these are things I'm not proficient in, but here's what areas where I think we'll be able to have some success. And I tell them in it, with them, it's confidential. All that's what builds that trust. And then of course the caring part. Well, that you have to care. Natasha, I worked for a commander one time that, as Commander and I were talking, stopped me in the conversation and said, oh, hang on, Shawn. I'm going to go talk to this soldier and ask him how his wife is so he knows that I care. And I thought, wow, I'm going to go talk to that soldier and ask how his wife is because I do care. Right. And there's a difference there on the appearance of it and actually doing it. And so, you have to really enjoy people and want to, really just open up yourself and become vulnerable, I think, to develop that level of care with them.
And what I like about that example too is if you have to say it, you don't need to tell me I can trust you. You're going to show me through your actions. Right. And so there's that thing where it's like a lion doesn't have to tell you it's a lion. It's a lion. Nobody questions it. So I think when it comes to leadership, when it comes to caring, when it comes to really listening, you don't have to say, I'm listening or I care. People will know because they will see it and they will feel it when they're around you.
That's right. My ears cringe. Well, I guess my ears don't cringe. I cringe when I hear somebody say, hey, I'll be honest with you. I'm like, well, yeah, I hope so. I mean, yeah, you better be honest with me. That's the whole point of the conversation here. I think a way to build some of that rapport up front is in the coaching environment, is actually I give them surveys, right? So the very first time I meet with a new client, it's always fun and exciting because they're scared to death, right? They don't know what to expect from some of these things, which is fine. I mean, I wouldn't either. I had lunch with a county sheriff one time, right? Because he was curious about all this stuff. And he's like, well, I've never met with a life coach before. I don't know what to expect. I'm like, well, one, life coaching is whatever, but coaching is coaching. So, we're here and I've got some things but let's just talk about you. I mean, don't talk about, I can't say, well, here, I've got these 5 programs or I've got these things over here and these products and this. I said, what's going on in your world? What's going on in your personal life? What's going on, at work? How's your staff? How are your deputies? All that kind of stuff. But it was funny to watch somebody, as a sheriff with 20 plus years in law enforcement, be nervous, right, to meet with somebody as warm and lovable as me. But I give a tool, right? So I asked them to complete a quick survey that first time. As I explained what coaching is and how it works, talk through the Tagoro model and all that jazz. I asked them to fill out a survey on just some goals and what are their strengths that as they see them, what are some of the weak areas, what do they have to contribute to the world that maybe nobody else has, just things like that, really just to get them thinking. Because it's informative to me, right, to engage them in some very personal conversation, but also I'm able to do an assessment. Okay, where are they? Where was this person mentally? Do they struggle to do this? It gives me an idea of what level of self-awareness do they already have, and wherever it is fine. But that gives me, okay, well now I know we'll start here. If they're a little bit more advanced or they're more self-aware, more experienced with these kinds of things, well, great. Well, we're not going to start down here at the the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy pyramid, right? We're gonna elevate up here a little bit and get you where you are, and then take you further, right? So that's one of the tools I use, and that's been pretty handy because everybody is different.
I appreciate though the utilization of surveys and these different ways to not only for you to understand more about them, but for them to kind of start to get comfortable in what type of information am I revealing? Not that people have deep, dark secrets, but I've noticed that people tend to come into it like I'm going to somehow magically uncover and now know their deepest, darkest secrets. And it's like, it's going to be fine. Also, this is not therapy.
Yep. These surveys are good too. Because sometimes, in fact, my latest client, I'm coaching this one manager, and last time I was with her, I said, okay, so, then to start, what do you want to discuss today? She's like, I don't know. Everything's going pretty well. I'm like, okay, well, let's see. Let's take a look at, how you answered some of these questions. Oh, okay, sure. What did you mean by this? That was it. And then we went on, we uncovered all kinds of other things. Because right, they're not sure what to share, not share. And from my experience, it takes maybe by the third or fourth meeting, now that they've finished with all the superficial, okay, well, here I did the assignments, and here's my next topic I wanted to discuss because I'm having a hard time with this person that won't shut up at work, and how do I handle that? And like, okay, well, we can certainly discuss that, but let's dig into some more. So, but after a while, now you're into it. Now the benefit really comes out of the coaching.
Yes, and it's like at first you get to meet their representative, the person that they want you to think they are, which is just a very high-functioning, well-put-together adult, which we can all be that. And then by listening, though, by building that trust and asking them questions and then them realizing kind of what coaching is, I think you're absolutely right. By that third or fourth session, all of a sudden, you're like really making amazing progress and those amazing aha moments in almost every session after that.
Yeah, that's very true. Very, very true.
I've had people who say, oh, well, I've had a coach before and it didn't work. And I was like, okay, and that's fine. Not every coach is for every person. And they're like, yeah, I went once. I'm like, oh boy.
So often when you and I talk, you'll say something that reminds me of something else, right? So this tennis coaching book, he was tennis pro and he had learned and was developing his coaching, right? So eventually, right, he wrote this book on how to coach it. It's called The Inner Game of Tennis, right? So it's not necessarily technique, but although he gets to it through the inside. And he had helped somebody with their backhand. And so this guy was so pleased, he ran and told his friend, hey, I got it figured out now. And so the friend came to the pro, sitting out there drinking, iced tea, I guess, at the club, and said, hey, can you help me with mine? I've been struggling with this for a long time. In fact, I've been to 5 different tennis coaches and none of them have been able to help me. And this guy's like, okay, well, what situation? Let me see you swing. After he watched him swing a little bit. And he asked him, he says, okay, so what do you think you're doing wrong? He says, well, I think, they tell me I'm lifting my racket up, at the wrong time and stuff. And he's thinking to himself, well, you are. And if 5 other pros have told you that, why are you coming to me to tell me that that's what you already know is your problem? But so he watched the guy swing a little bit more. He said, all right, well, come over here with me. And they walked they're sitting out there at the cafe area right at the club to one of those big glass windows, right? Those glass windows. And where you could see his reflection. He said, okay, now do a couple of swings and watch yourself here. And he did. And the guy's like, oh my goodness, I see what they're talking about. He says, I never noticed that. It was in the right position, but then right before I hit it, I would lift up, and that was causing me to top the ball or whatever the situation was. But he didn't have the visual. So everybody could tell him, oh, hey, you're raising your racket up too high, but he didn't know, well, what is too high until somebody showed it to him, right? So he had to see it. And so the ability to, when you connect and you have that and you can help the person paint their own picture of what their situation is, and that's one of the other joys there. But
as coaches too, with that, it's like, how does this person learn and how are they going to be able to take in information? So true. I'm a person who, if something is said, or if I hear something, or if I read something, I can consider that and I'll be like, oh yeah, that probably seems like the problem. Let me lower my racket or do whatever things. But some people, they're like, no, because what I'm doing feels right, or it seems right, or this is how I originally learned it. And so then it's just like, okay, well, I need to get that, like you said, paint that image in your mind in a different way. So, how do I do that? And I think that's one of the better challenges of coaching, because oftentimes you're asking those questions and you're not like, listen, here's what it is, because that would be definitely not good.
Yeah. I've had so many times when the client is describing what their obstacle is, I know exactly how to solve their problem. but I don't say anything, right? I just continue to ask and probe, because really the idea is the answer is inside of them already. They already know what to do, even if they don't recognize that and they're not aware of it, right? They get it. So by asking these questions, they solve it. And on how many times they come up with a solution that is absolutely going to work for them that never crossed my mind, right? So I learned, okay, well, this is how I would solve it, but it's not my problem to solve. They're the ones that are going to have to do it. So they have to own the solution. And so helping them discover that is that's what's so powerful. And that's when they walk away going, man, now I've got this.
Yes. And it gives them that confidence. And then, like you said, like the way that you would have solved it would have been right for you, but they figure out their own way. But also in those moments, we don't want to rob people of a lesson that they could be learning, right? Because I've definitely seen that sometimes whether it's in coaching or in other leadership roles, where I'm like, okay, we can get this resolved in like 5 minutes. All right, I'm just not going to say it. And then 3 days later, the individuals had worked through it, but they worked through it, and then they had more confidence, they were more empowered. And then next time they actually needed a lot less coaching and a lot less guidance from me, because they were like, okay, I can probably figure this out. And then it took less time and they had that confidence.
Absolutely.
So earlier you had said that you are a high I on the DiSC assessment. And so let's talk about all things DiSC. What is the DiSC assessment and what information does it provide to an individual?
Certainly. Well, for those that aren't familiar, DiSC it's a tool, right? I mentioned that earlier on. And it's a tool that provides not just self-awareness into our own behaviors and what motivates us and what drives us and how we communicate as a person, but it also gives us insights into what might motivate or drive others and how others may prefer to communicate and how they express themselves and how they receive information. So it equips us with all of that. And it's based off of Dr. Martson, who back in the 1920s, he was at Harvard, he was doing some research for a book, and he identified 4 behavioral styles. And it's interesting that he used 4 because if you go back through time, it's like everybody always had 4 ways of things. But it's proven really to be very applicable to human behavior, and then it's usable. It's not just academic, right? And it's actual application of these behavioral styles. And so universally, people get lumped into one of these 4 groups, DISC, or they're a blend of DISC, right? So D, of course, being dominant, I is influencer, S is steady, and C can either be compliant or conscientious, right? And on the spectrum of things, if you think of your D types are your no nonsense, just the facts, want to get things done right now, very aggressive, very commanding, just boom, boom, we're going to do it this way. That's a D personality. We all know, that there are folks out there like that. Yeah, your I's, life of the party. Right, those folks love to tell stories. They love to talk. They're very social. They care about people. They engage. They're good connectors. And then your S's, right, steady. This is actually the bulk of the population falls under the S quadrant. And these are the workhorses. They get stuff done. They want to be on a team. They want to make it work together. Let's just move forward and do the right thing. Very relationship oriented. And then your C's, you compliant or conscientious. These are your really detail-oriented folks, the people that keep tabs on it. They're very detail-oriented, process-oriented, much more focused on the process than on the people involved, which is good. Right? So people have blendings of all of these. So for me, yes, I'm an IDS. What I do with my coaching clients is I have them take this survey at the very beginning of our coaching relationship. One, because I want them to start off with a foundation of self-awareness that we share, okay? Because they may think they know what they know, and I might think I know what they know. But if we have a DiSC report that we're both looking at and we discuss it and we analyze it, well, then we can understand it. And they start to see how those behavioral styles really are driven by patterns of behavior. A lot of times I'll ask in a group, I'll say, okay, if there's an elevator, comes down, door opens, are you the kind of person that hopes that there is nobody on the elevator so you won't have to talk to them? Or are you the kind of person that's hoping there's somebody there that you can visit with? right? And people, respond, which way or the other. So obviously your S's and your C's, they don't want anybody on there. I mean, S's as relations to people, they'll always smile if there's somebody there, but they don't really want anybody to be there. D's, okay, yeah, somebody's here. I might be able to do something for them or with them or there. And then I just, oh yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk to you, and hey, good morning. And what was your day? And all that kind of stuff. Likewise, I ask sometimes the question, all right, if you're going on vacation, are you the kind of person that makes that detailed list of everything that has to be done before you get out the door? You got to stop the mail, get the grass cut, put the animals at the, shelter, or whatever those things you have to do. Or are you the person that's already thinking about the vacation, who you're going to see there, what you're going to do, the fun you're going to have, right? And so there's different kinds of folks there. And so that helps people realize, okay, there are patterns to our behavior. And if we can understand those patterns, then we know what to expect. So you talk about what this does to help an individual. Well, if I know how I respond in certain situations and how I see the world, and I can learn to recognize these behavioral patterns in other people, well, then I also can learn to know what to expect when I engage with them, right? How they're going to approach things and what's motivating them. And so when it comes to leadership, that's huge, because now you're able to connect better and speak the right lines of language and really have a more effective relationship.
And in that assessment, you get 3 essentially graphs or 3 charts.
Correct.
And what is the difference between those 3 charts?
Oh, sure. The first graph is your public self. And because I work with professionals as a coach, a lot of times it's, well, here's your work face. Okay, this is how you think people expect you to be at work. So it's really what your expectations of what you think other people have expectations of. So that there's a pattern there, right? How you're more of a dominant person, or you think people expect you to be, more team oriented or more detail or less this or more that, right? So it's what you perceive other people's expectations of you to be. That's the first graph. This middle graph I find very interesting, because that is your, hey, I am under pressure graph. All right. So when you get stressed, what changes? And a lot of times you default to those core behavioral styles that are ingrained in you either through heredity or environment or, other sources. So those are where you're, okay, so I'm stressed. Here's how I respond to that. And then the graph number 3 is really where your letters are pulled from. And it's a blending of those first 2 graphs, right? So it's the average of those scores. Depicts where you are, because really that third graph is kind of, well, it's you sitting on the couch watching TV. I mean, it's this, no pressure, nobody's watching you, you're not being scrutinized, it's you being you. It's your true identity. Equipped with that, in the context of a work environment, somebody can say, oh yeah, I do it. I guess, wow, okay. And then when something does pressure me, and my eye goes up significantly, yeah, you're right. When I feel pressure, I want to talk this out. Other people, when they're under pressure, their eye drops. And the last thing they want to do is talk about it, because they want to process it mentally, not verbally, right? So if people start to see that, they're like, oh, okay. And if I can now recognize that in another person, oh, well, now I know why, let's say, now I know why my spouse doesn't want to talk about this right now, because he or she is processing it, where I might want to talk about it, or I want to process it, I don't want to talk about it, and I know they want to, because that's their default. And so again, you get that open, you discuss that part of it, again, it strengthens relationships.
I think those 3 charts really do help with self-awareness a lot too, because I know the first time I ever did my assessment, I was just like, oh, wow. Okay, so apparently I go to work and it's just a big show that I'm putting on for everybody else. But then it was helpful in that it was like, is that an expectation that others are putting on me, or is it something that I'm pulling from the environment and just assuming? So then they're not really getting me as an authentic person or as an authentic leader, because I think they need me to be this like high D person, high D, high I. That perspective of those 3 charts is really good for self-awareness. And I remember you mentioning earlier that self-awareness piece it's huge. It'll also help resolve a lot of other things.
Right. Yeah.
How can a leader leverage their own, or maybe even a group of, like, everyone in their team does the DiSC assessment, they can look at all those charts. How can that better impact how we actually engage with the people around us?
It does help with the communication, right? I mean, the greatest myth about communication is the belief that it's actually happened. for anybody that's ever read the 5 love languages, right, by Dr. Chapman, same kind of thing. Certain people express affection in some ways, and they would receive it in those kinds of ways, those as their primary love languages. And in a very real way, DiSC is similar to that. People with those identifiers, right, Ds, perceive information a certain way, and they want to receive it a certain way. I's, likewise. In fact, when I was working up in Huntsville, I had a couple of coworkers. One of them was probably a high D. I never had them do the assessments, but as I got smarter on this, I could recognize those patterns in them. So I knew he was a high D, and he may have had some other letters in there too, but high D. So when I went to talk to him, I knew to make it an effective conversation, I would speak about the facts. I would talk about what I needed from him and what I could provide to him and timelines. And it was a great conversation. And I was in and I was out. And then there was another guy that was more of a high IS type person. So I just built it into my mental timeline. If I have to go talk to this guy, all right, well, we're going to spend the first 2 or 3 minutes talking about the weekend, trying to buy a house, so we'd talk about that a little bit. And then we would get to the meat of whatever it was that I needed from him or I could provide him. And then we'd close out with some other little chit-chatty kind of thing, and then I'd be out of there. All right. But I knew I had to do to really connect with them. So we're all familiar with the golden rule, right? Treat everybody like you want to be treated. Well, in this context, it's remembering the platinum rule, which is treating people how they want to be treated. And so both of them I had great rapport with because I would speak to them in their language, right? In not codified it, right? In the ways that it would be effective for them. So as a leader, to be able to do that with your people is huge. I have a client now who oversees 3 different organizations, and he is a DiSC, right? So he's a very dominant kind of personality, but he's also very detail oriented. So as a D being his first letter, the biggest fear of a D is the fear of being taken advantage of. And so as the business owner, when somebody would ask for something as simple as, can I take a couple of days off next week? His default was, this person's trying to get over it. Why are they trying to screw me? It was always, they're taking advantage of my generosity, whatever. This is how he didn't realize that that's what he did until we did this assessment. And I had him and his chief operating officer take this at the same time, separately, of course. And then I brought them together and I walked them through this workshop. And we went through slides and discussions and some of this, like we're just sharing here. And then halfway through, I gave them their reports and just had them look at the letters. We didn't go into the reports. We just talked about front, and then we continued to go through the presentation. And it was amazing that both of them were like, oh yeah, that is totally you. No, this is you. No, this is me. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it happens all the time. But he came to realize that he had that fear. And so now the whole idea of being self-aware is that you can make a change. Or we all have those heat of the moment thoughts. That person's trying to screw me, or they're trying to get over on me. Okay. Are they really? No. Let me think about this for a second. No, they want the day off because their kid has a field trip next week, and so they're not trying to get over on me. They're trying to. So if he would pause in that moment, right, and change his behavior, which made him a more effective leader in engaging with that particular employee in that instance, right? So it's that self-awareness here. Okay, so being self-aware is great. Now I got to do something with that. And so as a team now, what he's done, because he's expanded this out, and he's had me conduct these assessments on his other managers. And as we start to kind of draw this picture, he's seeing that actually they've hired pretty well, in that you don't all want to all be the same, right? If you had 4 DiSC people working together, there's going to be a lot of conflict, because really, as good as we all are, we all have blind spots. And just like the D has certain strengths, as does the I and the S and the C, they also have blind spots. And so pieces that their behavior could be interpreted differently by somebody else. And so by having a team of people that work together that are complementary, because everybody is bringing something a little bit different. And if you're all aware of those differences, you see the similarities, and then those differences really make up for perhaps other shortcomings. So from a team perspective, it really enhances, one, there's team building, right? Because you get to know each other a little bit as you discuss this. but it really provides an opportunity to make sure you're really getting the right kinds of solutions. Because if you all thought the same way, well, then you're going to come up with a solution that's great for people that think like that, but you're missing out on a whole other audience.
I like that spirit of shared language too, where sometimes you can just acknowledging in the same type of way. I acknowledge this person's a high D or a high I. But I think also when it comes to those behaviors in the workplace, if you look at DiSC and you go clockwise, right, and you start with like the top left and just like DISC, the ones that are opposite each other will tend to be the people who can trigger each other too, right? So if D is opposite of S, S's are sensitive to change, not sensitive in that they're, maybe crying all the time at work, but they're more sensitive to change. And a high D cannot handle a sensitive person. Like they're just, they'll steamroll over them and they'll just keep moving forward.
Right. And
then you have the high I and then the C on those two other opposite ones. And the C is like, can we get some work done? Where the I is just kind of, so to be able to even acknowledge that it's like, okay, I understand that when I work with this person, there are going to be things that I am triggered by because of my preferences. And so in that to be like, okay, I understand where they're coming from and where their strengths are, and that I don't have those strengths. So right. We both need to be here.
That's very true. So then they recognize, oh, when I hear this other person say a phrase, I need to know that, okay, here's how I used to interpret that, but now that I know myself, yes, they're saying that, but that's not really what's behind that, right? They're not, like for a C, the biggest fear they have is criticism, right? So you could say, something that's really not critical, but they're going to perceive it as critical. Rephrase it in ways that come across as not that way, or as an I. I mean, I's fear rejection, okay? So when engaging with an I person, there's a social aspect to it. There's an expressing of appreciation and value, and then they're more engaged at that point.
How often do you see people, so back to those three charts, how often do you see people where all three charts look pretty similar?
It does happen. And ideally, I suppose, not to put a judgment on things, but studies show that people that have very similar charts across the whole gamut there, where there's not too much fluctuation, and too much is subjective anyway, right? But where it's not wild swings in their lettering, if it's very consistent, they're very adaptable. There's somebody you would want to hire, right? Potentially, because they don't have those kinds of swings. Because if they have swings, well, then there's the person is trying to manage things that they don't understand about themselves, because they're trying to put on a performance that isn't authentic. What's so interesting about this is people can improve their understanding and gain, more self-awareness, and then, learn what to do with that awareness. And then they start to see that in other people. So it can really change some of the patterns of their own behavior. We always say, oh, that guy's changed, or boy, she's really different these days. Well, when they've learned something new or they've undergone some experience, there are things that can change our patterns. And so this helps to maybe process those people further that have those wild swings. And through coaching, it starts to bring their lives to sort of, come together a little bit more and in a more effective way. We're all so busy. It is very difficult to find time to sit and pause and reflect on things. And coaching allows for that to happen, because it's a dedicated time for, an hour, 90 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever the session is, to have some of that opportunity to really just stop and think. And it's almost like, if I got a gym membership, I'm going to go to the gym, and then for that hour I'm going to work out. Same thing with coaching. Okay, I've committed to this. I've got the sessions lined up. I'm paying for this. I'm going to do it. And then so they do. And so it's committed. And it's a great opportunity then to learn that growth that then, ruminates around there in the back of the subconscious. And it starts to demonstrate itself in the conscious mind, later on.
Have you ever seen someone who they took the assessment and then, they worked on themselves, they were changing their ways, if you will, and then maybe they took the assessment again at a different time, and the results in one or more of the charts was different?
Sure. Not so much that they were trying to change them, but I know a person that took an assessment back in 2016 and was a SCD. And then just 6 months ago, retook it and was a straight up C. All right, so we're talking, what is that? About 4 or 5 years or so, from when they took it. And so we discussed that, and we found that, okay, well, was this person trying to change? No, there was no need to change. They were pretty stable before, but your world changes, your environment changes. Are you working, not working? Do you have young kids or older kids? Are you caring for an aging parent? Do you have struggles with finances at work? Or, so as things change, I think our patterns adjust too. As we learn new things, sometimes our patterns may change. So yes, they do and can fluctuate to some degree, I think, over time. And so that's interesting to see what kind of longitudinal study might be out there about that. But absolutely, the survey is real simple. As you know, you've taken it. It takes less than 15 minutes to complete. And that's what's so interesting is every time I've done one of these, in fact, I just did a workshop down in Montgomery. The participants there, as they're looking at the results, how in the world, out of that simple little survey, could you peg me so accurately? I'm like, hey, it's this. You answered the questions, and you answer authentically and honestly, and this is who you are. And they said, this is me to a T. And then they all share it to each other because they've known each other for a while. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's totally you. And it's every time I see it, I don't know, I just never get tired of watching people suddenly have those light bulbs come on, and it's empowering. It's really empowering to know about you and how to interpret what other people are doing.
So what inspires you about coaching?
Well, that's a great question. What inspires me about coaching? I like people, right? And I've always known I've been a people person. I used to be the social butterfly. It was, all those other names that people slapped up, try to label you with. I do enjoy people, although people irritate me sometimes, but I still like them. They're people. So what inspires me about coaching, though, it almost goes back to when I was instructing. When you can help somebody learn and they pick up something and they get it, not just, rote memorization, but they actually understand something new that they can use, right? I can learn all kinds of things that I'm not going to use, but if I can learn something or help somebody learn something that they can actually apply almost immediately, there's just huge personal satisfaction and reward in that for me, because I see that with them and then they can go do it. And that's, with the coaching, so often with my clients now, I guess really what keeps me coming back to that is at the end of that hour, right? When they say, hey, well, where do you want to achieve at the end of the hour? And we get there and they have that action plan, and then they can go do it. And I meet with them a week later, and the first 10 minutes are the report. All right, well, here's how it went. If I haven't heard from them already, oftentimes I get calls like, oh, you have no idea, this was amazing. It happened just like we hoped it would. Or, ooh, yeah, it didn't go the way we thought it would, but it was still the right decision that we executed it appropriately. So there's always that report piece. But yeah, that it's the idea of application and use. I think that's just a reward because people grow. And then to see that one business owner, I've been with him for almost a year and a half now, coaching with him and his COO, and he has come so far, and his business is booming, and it's just neat because he's answering his own problems before he even brings them to me, and so now he comes and says, hey, do you think this is the right thing? I'm like, well, did it work? He says, yeah. Were you satisfied with it? Yeah. Well, then, yeah, it was the right thing. So it's funny because he anticipates now, and so that's good, right? So now he's having conversations not just with his employees at work and his other leaders, but he shares with me that he's having similar conversations with his wife and his kids, and helping them to figure out how to solve their problems. So it's neat to be able to pay that forward in that way. So I'm inspired by people's success, and in fact, that's for my business, right? As Value Leadership Solutions, our mantra, every day we add value to leaders who multiply value to others. And so if we can just do this and grow this, what a better community we can have here in society, and just as humanity, right? So that's my objective, right? Is humanity is impacted by my coaching.
And I just love that concept of adding value to other people, right? Because that can be, it's whatever they need. It's not whatever your perceived value is, or, it's you working on yourself all the time, right? Because everybody gets better, or everybody wins when a leader gets better. And it's also though, now I'm not going to hoard this information or this knowledge or these insights. I'm actually going to find ways to share them with others if then they choose to use them, it can impact them in wonderful ways. So I really love that. So Shawn, where and how can people find you and learn more about your work and any upcoming projects?
All right. Well, they could Google Value Leadership Solutions. I am still in the process of developing our website, and the web domain name is going to be valuedleaders.com. And value is an acronym, right, for vision, awareness, legacy, unity, and empowerment. Those are some of the approaches to what I think leaders do. And I believe that as a leader, we have a responsibility, right? That we can talk all day long about positional leadership versus, effective leadership, right? Having been a program manager in a corporate environment, I've learned management is different than leading. And, managers really, they have a process to adhere to. They've got procedures, they have timelines, there's a commitment. So, for the employees hey, you're kind of a cog in the wheel. This is the schedule. I need you here this time. It's very structured that way. And managers tend to treat people as just people. You're just a cog in the wheel here. Where leadership is different. Leaders don't necessarily care about being as efficient as possible. They're more focused on being effective. And leaders treat people like individuals. So to be an effective leader, they'll say, okay, yeah, the duty day starts at 8 o'clock in the morning, but I understand that you can't be here at 8. You can't get here till 8:15 because you've got to drop your son off at school or whatever the situation is. We can work around that and we'll figure out a way to solve that. Well, now you have influence, right? Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So if you can lead and connect and treat people like individuals, much more effective way of leading than not, and just treating everybody the same.
Thank you so much, Shawn. This has been amazing.
My pleasure. This is great. And I'm just such a fan of yours, Natasha, and everything that you do for your clients and for other leaders out there, and just your ability to be approachable and share all the good things that you've experienced and that you've been trained on and know. To be more valuable, we've got to make ourselves more valuable. And if we can do that, then we can add more value to the people around us. And you are a paragon of all of that. So I'm very much a fan and love you to death.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Equipping Leaders. All of the resources mentioned in this episode can be found on my website, NatashaCheyenne.com. On the website, you can also find a weekly leadership journal entry, a resource page with challenges and downloadable content, a place to sign up for my weekly newsletter, and an upcoming leadership platform full of workshops. You can also follow me on Instagram at novel_Natasha and on Twitter and Facebook at Natasha Cheyenne. If you'd like to hear more about a specific topic, please reach out and let me know. Join me next week for another episode.